All right, and welcome to RV Life Pro live product training and Q&A. Welcome to our second to the last broadcast of the season. We'll wrap it up next Wednesday, and that'll be it till spring. We want to remind you to follow us on, if you're watching this on the RV Life Facebook page, be sure and like and follow so you can catch future broadcasts when they start back up, as well as next week. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, be sure and subscribe and click thumbs up and all that so that you can be alerted not only for these videos, but any training videos we put up on our YouTube channel. So today is interesting. I had a call from someone and some pictures, and today we're going to talk about what can really happen out there on the road. We've preached a lot from this pulpit, if you will, about vetting your route carefully, and we're going to see a case, an interesting case. I won't say any more than that right off. Let's see if I got any other pre notes to go. So that's it. We're going to move right into it. I'm going to pull up a trip here, and remember, if you have comments, be sure and ask those. We'll get to them kind of as we go along here. Let me share this screen first. And I'm going to move my little window so I can see things. Yeah, we got a nice question already, so I'm interested to jump into that. When we change or delete the initial stop, it messes all the gas calculations. Any suggestions? Yeah, look, if you've already done all your fuel and then you go change your trip, yeah, it's pretty much going to mess up your gas calculations. As I've said here before, my typical MO for planning a trip is planning and routing all the campgrounds and getting those campground reservations first before I ever start messing with fuel, because of that very reason. The minute you start goofing that stuff up, it causes some issues. Now, the fix is basically to just go in there and boom, 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 delete all the fuel stops, turn on fuel, and go add back in as needed and kind of work your way back through the fuel stops. So, yeah, that's going to happen if you really monkey with that. Now, as we've shown before, and let me jump around here just a second. You might move this over so I can see comments later. You might get away with simply altering the fuel of your new starting point. Like if you knew, well, we're really going to start from there, which means we're going to have a little bit more fuel or a little bit less fuel, you can go in here and edit this first stop, as we've shown, and alter this starting fuel. So you might get away with a quick fix by doing that, but otherwise, yeah, you pretty much have to just burn all your fuel stops and start over. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, so the other thought behind this, as we look at this, we want to do redo a long trip and we're halfway through. Yeah, one possibility there is to cut that trip in half, maybe to make it less painful. One little trick is you can take a long trip, make a copy of it, and then just delete half from the bottom and then half from the top of the second copy, and now you've got your two halves. But yeah, it's an inherent problem. Is the benefit, of course, is knowing exactly where you're going to get fuel 100%. But if that changes, especially if you're changing that, it's a little, most of this is designed to be planned before you go. But if you're in the middle of a trip and you start changing things around, yeah, I mean, there's just going to be some additional legwork in there. Yeah, I mean, there's just not looking at Annette's comments here, and there just isn't a quick fix for that. The fuel works unbelievably well, But if you start changing it after the fact, it's basically got to be redone. So some good questions though, Annette, and I feel for you. I've done big trips like that and then realized I got to change the fuel, and it's painful. I've really even almost gotten to the point of doing fuel last. Um, Initially, I would do the campgrounds, then do the fuel. Now I knew where my stops were, and I could fill in with rest stops and Walmart and grocery and restaurants or whatever else I wanted. The disadvantage of doing fuel last is you might end up needing fuel 5 minutes after a rest stop, right? So now you're like, well, I'm not going to go to that rest stop, so let me go delete the rest stop. It sometimes can be a little bit of extra work. For those of you with acute hearing, the vibration and noise we hear today is 3 or 4 offices down. They're grinding the concrete floor. I kid you not. So if things are a little bit hummy in the background, you didn't stay up too late. It's just extra noise here. Let's take a look. This is a great question here. I have a harvest host stop planned where GPS directions are inaccurate. I can't get TripWizard to accept true coordinates. So you can put true coordinates in here. You have to, I used to have a set. Let me see if I still have a set of coordinates tucked away here that I used. I should have them still. Give me just a second. Talk amongst yourselves. Here it is. So here is an actual true set of GPS coordinates and the way they should be formatted. And so right now, depending on how good your site is, it's up here at the top. And we can see the way this is written is there's no leading characters. Now, granted, some will have a minus sign if it's below the equator, maybe, I think. But otherwise, if we look at this coordinate here, which we know to be Mexican Hat, Utah, it's 37 degrees, 06 feet, I think the feet mark, 09.5 inches north, space, and then all the westerly coordinates are all tagged together. So if I leave that where it is and hit search, it does in fact take me to exactly where that is. I know that's where that is because those are the coordinates for the Forrest Gump Highway. We've talked about that before. The 163 headed down to Monument Valley. So TripWizard will absolutely take proper coordinates. If you find that those are not working, I would question the coordinates because we definitely do accept those. So, all right. We'll see if we've got any other little questions pending. Good questions, by the way. Usually I don't get those right out of the gate. It's usually silence for 20 minutes. So I love that. Okay, what we're going to talk about today, and it's interesting you bring up Harvest Host because that is the location in question today. Now, I had a call from some folks. You may have seen them on YouTube. It's Jimmy and Lisa Cox from Find Us Camping. And they are, to say they're veteran RVers is an understatement. Not so much in years, but in miles. These guys have put on about 80,000 miles behind the wheel in the last couple of years. They use RV TripWizard a little bit, but they mostly lean on the RV Life app exclusively. Now, you guys know me. If you've seen me do this show, you know I don't roll that way, right? I want to plan everything out, and before I get behind the wheel. These guys, good, veteran drivers, they know what they're doing, veteran RVers, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles under their belt. They have a high confidence in their abilities and in the RV Life app. It really hasn't steered them wrong, maybe once or twice. And so I get a call from them to warn us about a road. One of the things we can do is if a road turns out to be questionable, we can block it, route it, reroute it, tag it, do different things. I don't know how many folks think that every road in our country is mapped, cataloged, and properly attributed. It ain't, right? It is not. There are still some places where they're just kind of there and nobody really knows about them, but the roads are there. They're not cataloged. Maybe the truckers never use them. Maybe RVers never use them. Maybe they're just, who knows what the reasons are. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But they wanted to point out. So the first thing I got from them is a picture. And I want to show you this picture. And you can see, and you got to study this picture a little bit. It looks like a fairly broad turn, but with this fifth wheel, and I'm not a fifth wheel owner, I've got a motorhome, but we look at this fifth wheel, it is really tight right here. They've got the jacks down right now, but as you can see, this particular fifth wheel runs pretty low to begin with, and then when we throw jacks on it, it's really tight, right? And so, of course, my first question was, what is the route? What is the trip name? Where are you going? Was it vetted out? Et cetera, et cetera. And I got that information. So I have the trip right here that they used, and I can show you the red flags. Now look, let me make it clear. They right up admitted, yeah, we threw it in Trip Wizard, but we really didn't vet it very carefully, and we didn't follow it 100%, but it's there, right? So here's the trip in question. You see a fuel warning. We're not particularly concerned about that right now. But we're going to look at the Harvest Host location they were headed to. We can see as we get in here, number one, we see a mile of unpaved road. Right now, I am deleting that location from my data banks, from my memory, everywhere else. I'm not driving a mile down an unpaved road in my motorhome. Been there, done that, have the t-shirt and burned it, right? I don't want to do that. But I'm not everybody. If you got a big truck and a trailer and it's not a big deal to you, that's no problem. How do I know it's about a mile? I can look at the scale down here in the lower right-hand corner, 2,000 feet. It's about 3/4 of an inch. 1, 2, 3. I've got maybe 6,000 feet here. Obviously, a little bit more than a mile, but nevertheless, this is clearly labeled with an unpaved road. But that's not the issue, right? The issue is the road. Now, as you can see, we've got two really pointy turns. And we're going to look at this first one first. And as we go, we can look at this. Obviously, the first thing we're going to do, and I got to slow down a little bit because I'm really fired up about this. What have we been preaching about here over and over and over every week? Satellite view, street view, elevation, grade. Vet your route 100%, right? So we look at this and say, okay, strike one is I've got an unpaved road, but that's fine. Again, if you're willing to go down there, not a big deal. But we need to look at these turns on satellite view, don't we? So we're going to jump over to satellite view, and we're going to look at the lesser of the two offensive turns, or the lesser offensive of the turns. And if we look at that in scale, that doesn't look that bad, right? It's really the last, what I can, based on the scale, the last 50 feet here is almost a regular 90-degree turn. Even though big picture, it does skew to 45 degrees or whatever, you can kind of see the little bit of straightening right here that makes that maybe an 85-degree turn. It's not a big deal, okay? That's not our problem, right? That isn't this. Okay, this other little guy here is what scares us. And we see, okay, that's obviously a very, that's ugly right there, isn't it? And so no problem. What have we all learned over the last, 15 weeks that we've been doing it this year? We'll go to Street View. So we drag our little street icon up here. We drop that baby in there. And we get nothing. Now it's like, oh, okay, Trip Wizard didn't have Street View. What's up with that? Oh, no, my friend. It's not Trip Wizard. We don't have Street View at all in Google Maps. So now you can see I've jumped out to Google Maps. Here's this same section in Google's view, right? So it's the same Google satellite view, the one that we had here in Trip Wizard, right? A little bit different. And let's drag our little Google Street guy out here. And we got nothing. So like, wait a minute, is Street View even working? So let's back up quite a ways and grab our Street View guy. And we still have nothing. Here we go. So this Alta Drive over here is the nearest place we've got any Street View whatsoever. So now we've got to look at and think about this a little bit. And we got a little bit of a red flag here, right? We've got a road that doesn't look particularly friendly, and there is no Google Street View at all. You know, if Google ignores something, that's a red flag right there, right? Okay, fine. Let's go to the West Virginia Department of Transportation, and here's that same section, and we don't see any type of flags. I'll tell you this much. Jimmy and Lisa pointed out there's no narrow road signs, sharp turn signs, no truck signs, low clearance. Well, there's no low clearance there. So there's no signage whatsoever indicating a problem. We can see that the West Virginia Department of Transportation taps into the Google Maps. And of course, they don't have any stuff. You can see they've got road conditions, traffic, camera signs, truck parking, blah, blah, blah. They got all this junk over here. There is nothing in this section about that whatsoever either. And of course, it's Google Maps, so we're not going to get any new information. So at this point, if you're planning this trip, the question is, do you still want to go to this harvest host? Now, it'd be easy to say no, you know, right now. And for me, we've already talked about that unpaved road. I'm not going here, okay? But what else could we do, right? I mean, it's easy to say, I don't want to go to that one, but maybe you really do. Maybe it's perfect. Maybe you know the people there. Maybe whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's the only place you can find. Whatever the case is. When we leave things to that ad hoc, random, we're just going to try it and see what happens, here's the results you get. You get to see what happens, right? And so we need to do better than that. Obviously, TripWizard's strength is the ability to do better than that. So rather than leave it up to the GPS and just hope for the best and wonder what's going to happen, and gee, I don't know how it's going to be, we'll just see when we get there, right? You know, to me, that's not an acceptable decision. Again, with respect to Jimmy and Lisa, they travel everywhere. They know the West Virginia area pretty well. And Jimmy pointed out that out of 80,000 miles, this is really only the second time that he's had a problem. And, you know, is this road truck safe or RV safe? You know, one of the questions we talked about here is if you were in a motorhome or an 18-wheeler that's higher up off the ground, could you make this turn? You know, I look at it and say, yeah, probably could, right? But this combination that Jimmy's got was problematic. So is that road 18-wheeler or RVer safe? Maybe. Is it possible that road's just not documented by anyone? More likely, right? If Google Maps and Google Street View doesn't show anything, that should have you concerned. It could very well be that is considered an RV safe road, and the unusual combination and route combination that Jimmy's got just doesn't fly. We at RV Trip Wizard, RV Life, obviously we do everything we can to give you an RV safe route. When you get a route like that is basically not documented, we come back and we stress, look, vet this thing out first. So there's a couple of things we could have done here. If we were intent on going to this location and we still wanted to plan our route and vet our route carefully, there's a few different things we could do to handle this concerning route. So the first thing is we got a couple of things. Obviously, we can sort of lean on old school thinking, right? Call the campground host and say, hey, what do you know about this route getting into your place? They did that after the fact. And in fact, he said, yeah, you need to come a different direction. Um, but we're going to look at that too, because there's a little bit of caveat there as well that we're going to find. You could just simply pass on this route. So the next step here is like, okay, we're determined to go there. The campground host says that, yeah, if you come in from 33 and come down, obviously you eliminate this sharp angle. So let's look at that. We're going to open Plan B. And again, this would all be planning I would need to do ahead of time before I hit the road. So we can see now that if we create a couple of custom stops, one of the things I can do right here is create a stop. And if I just am determined to go that direction, so this is Plan B, this is a planned turnaround. So the idea here is I've got a custom stop I created to just check that turn. As I'm following my GPS and I get up, I go, hey, wait a minute, this is the spot we need to stop and look and see if we can make this turn, right? If you can, you turn and you keep going. In this case, if I felt like I could not make that turn, I need to turn around and come at it from the other angle. Well, using some satellite view, I was able to determine here that if I followed this road a little bit, I could turn in. I could probably make a U-turn right here in this facility. Just come in here, turn around, come back down that way. Now, having said that, we've still got a couple of little turns here to be concerned about. Now, this again is mostly 90 degrees. This one's mostly 90 degrees. This one is a little concerning. You know, again, with no street view, do I go with Plan B, which is get to the turn. If it looks bad, go up and turn around. I'm not even comfortable with that based on this turn right here, although it's certainly not near as severe. But if I was already this concerned, this is 7 miles out and back at slow speeds. This is a 20-minute delay, right, realistically. So I'm not in love with that solution. Let's go. I'm looking at Annette's comments here. Good comments there. I want to stop right here because Annette, I'm not sure if you're asking this. So there is one feature. I can't tell if this is what you're saying, Annette, but in Trip Wizard, under the trip settings, under the routing and driving, under the RV info, under the RV info, you can set fuel warnings to multiple. And so that'll show all fuel warnings. And then after you fill the first one, it recalculates all the rest. And you fill the second one, it recalculates all the rest, and so on and so on. So it actually, if that's what you're asking, that feature is built in. Just set that to multiple fuel warnings. Hope that helps a little bit. Okay, so we determined that we weren't in love with Plan B. Let's look at Plan C. And the plan is we're gonna come in a different way altogether, right? So let's look at this route now. I find this a little harder to see, so I'm going to switch back to maps. And what we're doing here is we're going to come in on that 33 that the campground host recommended. So what I need to do to accomplish that is I've got to create a custom stop, right? I got to create this point right here so that it will take me off the freeway. You can see I have to get off the 64 way up here, and I've got some twisty turny roads here that I have to vet, but let's just go with it for now. And it will bring me down here, and then I can come up and around. Now, again, I've got some little stops, some curves. They're probably okay, but I need to create that custom route, and then I've got to add that custom stop again to get me back that way. Otherwise, it's going to try to take me what is mathematically the most efficient way, which isn't the way we want to go. So this is plan C, is to prepare a couple of stops, a custom stop to coerce the route the way I want to go. My problem with this route, of course, is the same. There's janky areas I'm not sure about and no street view that I can rely on to be comfortable with. Let's look at plan D. So plan D is a little bit unique, but it's not terrible. With plan D, what I'm doing is I am staying on the freeway and getting off at this Walmart that I found here. And at that point, I might take my tow vehicle. It might be a calculated stop where you're going to either disconnect the camper or take the tow vehicle or do something to then manually run over here and scout this out ahead of time to determine if this is an option. Now, that's a pain in the neck, frankly. It just depends. Again, we're assuming at this point that you really, really want to go to this location. So you might be willing to do that. And here there's no risk at all. There's just a time suck of getting out of, getting your vehicle and hopping over here and going and viewing this. You can see that, of course, upon exiting, it wants to take me on this technically more efficient route. If I wanted to fix that, I could just come back to this Walmart here. Whoops, too much. And I could just create a custom stop that I would put after the Harvest Host location. And now, of course, you see that it does not try to take me on that wayward path that we don't want to go. It just comes right back here. I hop back on 64 and I continue my route. So there are things you could do and things you could plan ahead of time to mitigate this stop. And it all depends on your rig, right? If you're pulling a 23-foot camper, this isn't a problem for you. 45-foot fifth wheels plus the truck, my rig's 43 plus the Jeep, those types of things. We just don't leave them to chance. But it doesn't mean you can't go there. These are, again, just creative ways to try to explore and mitigate that problem because regardless of the GPS, RV Life, Garmin, TomTom, if they're hardly still around, Rand McNally, any of these others, any GPS, if the state has not reported the conditions of this road, which seems to be the case, and the road is of so little interest to even Google, that's you're taking a chance by just blindly following a GPS. Now there's typically something like a bridge or an overpass gets reported. So we're still safe there. We vet the thing out with satellite view. There's no bridges or overpasses to worry about, but it's just that average drive. And then again, the road might be just fine. And it's just this weird combination of a sharp turn and a low fifth wheel that kind of cause a problem. But had my buddies Jim and Lisa truly vetted this out and realized, hey, wait a minute, I got a couple of red flags here, this long unpaved road, but mostly some sharp turns that I can't vet before we leave, they probably would have opted to stay somewhere else. And I certainly would have. And so anyway, that is a real example of being prepared. And then as we've talked about before, once you have created the trip, when you go to navigate on the RV Life app, just choose Match My Route Exactly. If you don't choose Match My Route Exactly, it's just going to decide to take that efficient way that is mathematically shorter, but has those hairpin turns in it that we didn't want, right? So match your trip exactly when you go to navigate. Okay, let's hit some more questions. Donna's got some feedback for Annette. Okay, so those are good stuff. It's some questions, take a little while to figure out exactly what's going on, and that's one of the reasons we have this type of session is to try to generate some conversation. I think I'm gonna look at Donna's comments here. Recalculate once the selected fuel stop below your fuel reserve. If you fuel up at subsequent stops, marker doesn't move. Okay. All right. I think now I interpret a little bit better on that what you were saying. Yeah. So let's speak to that just a little bit. When you're, I'll leave Donna's answer kind of up here. So let's speak to that for just a moment. As when we plan a big trip, obviously we've shown where you can show the fuel stops, you can fill up, you can plan, you can know exactly where you're going to get fuel, right? I think what's going on here and the question, sort of what I'm seeing the conversation kind of lead to is, what if we decided, hey, you know what? We're starving, right? We're not going to make it. We just really want to eat, right? We're tired, whatever the case may be. We pull over to get a bite, and lo, there's a fuel station right next door to the restaurant. And we're like, hey, we should just top off our fuel tank while we're here. The thing is, your trip doesn't know you did that, right? So when you get back in the vehicle and you start navigating with RV Trip Wizard or the app with the trip you've planned, it still thinks you need fuel 10 miles from now. And, it just doesn't know that you've already fueled up, and it's obviously your calculations are going to be skewed a little bit, because if you don't fill up, and let's say 10 miles is not that much, but let's say it was 30 miles. If you don't fill up in 30 miles and you just skip that fuel station, are you going to make it to the next one you actually have planned? Right? And other than sitting down with Trip Wizard and recalculating all your fuel stops, which is kind of what I think we were talking about, the simplest solution is to bite the bullet and get fuel again in 30 miles. Top off your fuel tank, and now you're back on track. So I don't know. That's kind of how I'm seeing the conversation go here. And I've done it before, and we've talked about it before. If I've got a very long trip with every fuel stop planned, and I randomly get fuel somewhere else, I still top off at whatever my officially scheduled fuel stop is, so that it puts my mileage and everything back on track. Because if I skip one, well, now I'm guessing again. I defeat the entire purpose of planning my fuel stops, because now I'm just guessing. And I don't want to do that. I'm just going to stop and get fuel again. It might only be 10 gallons, and it might be a pain in the neck to do it, but I don't have to worry anymore at that point. I'm back on track. I'm back on my schedule. So other than that, as we've said here, if you're in that planning stage, turn the fuel stops on multiple, do them all after your campgrounds have been solidified, and you'll be in pretty good shape. Okay, and then really on a related note, and just to throw out there, I don't have much else to cover today. This was the big thing, and I want to talk about one other little slightly related piece, but otherwise, hit me with any questions you have. Otherwise, it'll be an early wrap today. But the question comes up a lot about total length, the total length. And we talked about this a week or two ago, and I will admit to having kind of come around to the dark side, if you will. If we go to trip settings and RV info, we can see that, and I was fiddling with this myself, and I can't remember how long the truck is. I might have made this up, but I think we were fiddling around. But the idea is, instead of showing just my 45-foot RV length here, we've added their truck. And I think 64 is probably not accurate. I don't know how long an F-250 is, or 350 or whatever they've got. And obviously it comes into the bed a certain length. But for grins and giggles, if we had this thing set at 44 feet 11 inches, let's say, and we said, well, I've got to add 15 feet for a truck, which may or may not be right, but I got 59 feet 11 inches. I could even be generous and just round that to 60 feet, right? But the methodology here, and for the weight, maybe the rig's 20,000, right? But the truck weighs, say, 7,000. So my weight is actually 27,000. So why would I want to put in combined numbers versus individual numbers? Well, certainly from the weight, that's easy enough to surmise, because if I'm going over a bridge, both pieces are going over together. And so my total weight on that bridge is 27,000. Not, for my rig, we roll out at 36.5, and I've got a 5,000 pound Jeep, right? So I'm at 42,000, depending on how much junk I've loaded into the Jeep as well. So maybe I'm at 42,000 pounds. In this case, I don't know if 20,000 is accurate because I don't have a fifth wheel, but let's say it is. I've got a 7,000 pound truck. Maybe it weighs more. I don't know. But the point is, that's my combined weight going over a bridge. So I'm okay with that. Sorry, comment distraction. So I'm okay with that weight combination. As far as length, this right here is a strong use case for adding those lengths together. For a while, and I still kind of believe, I had a simple rule of thumb that I used and it was really pertaining to motorhomes, but because the tow vehicle behind me doesn't affect me when I drive my motorhome. The motorhome's too big. It doesn't affect my turning, my U-turn, my radius. It doesn't affect anything, right? And so I never really added the Jeep because it didn't affect that. In the case of weight, however, it is a cause and effect, or it is a combined weight that makes a difference on a bridge. But I could see easily on a fifth wheel like this, travel trailer combination, or even a motorhome and trailer combination, that length would affect where I may or may not be able to make those kinds of sharp turns. And so I think I've come over to that side of putting the total length in, so that if there was a flag, now we know there isn't one in this turn here, but if there was a flag, if this was a more not so rural of a road, and maybe the road is in a bigger city or near a bigger city, something like that, this road might actually be tagged no vehicles over 45 feet or over 40 feet or whatever. So if I had 40 feet for my RV, it would just gladly let me go. But then it turns out, well, I'm really however long because of the vehicle, and now I would have been told to avoid this road if I had combined lengths, whereas if I don't, I might not be. Again, it depends on if that road has restrictions. But I think I've come around to that methodology and that mentality, and I think we'll see in the future, we might even start asking for vehicle length and do that for you. But I think it's something everybody should consider as to whether it's a big deal. Again, I always give the example of, hey, if you've got a little pickup truck and a pop-up camper or a 15-foot Bambi or something like that, whatever, it's probably not a concern for you. But the bigger you are, the more this matters, and it could be a factor. Obviously, the number one point of today's conversation is about vetting routes, and when red flags present themselves, make multiple plans to deal with it, or don't go there, right? Just decide that's just not for us, right? I'm not going to do that. If you're going to rely on any GPS to take you somewhere with no planning, no preview, no vetting, no idea where you're really going, you do open yourself up to problems. The number one feature about TripWizard is being able to plan all this ahead of time and then navigate with confidence. And in this case, it didn't go quite as well as planned. So, okay. All right. So we'll call that a last call for comments, if there are any. Now's a good time to have them. Next week will be, again, the last week of the season. No telling what the topic will be. Hopefully by then I will know. Bring those burning questions with you, and we'll try to cover them. if you're up in Hershey, come by and say hi. We'll be at the booth downstairs in the Giant Center. And don't forget to like and thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channels, Facebook pages, all that sort of thing. And that's about it. I'm going to give it 5 more seconds. I don't see any more comments. I'll have Donna explain her insight to Annette's problem, make sure we get that sorted out. And I think we're good. So I hope this was helpful. This will be on our RV Life YouTube channel for future digestion for those that want to look at it again. And that's it. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week.